very much. So welcome to everybody to my decision day, and I need to tell you that this is being broadcast live on YouTube via the County Council website. A few welcomes. So we have Councillor Stephen Philpott, who is present, who is Select Committee Chairman. We have Councillor Martin Todd as the Opposition Spokesperson, and Councillor Louise Parker-Jones, the Independent Spokesperson. Welcome to you. But I'd also like to thank Councillor Kim Taylor, who was the previous Labour spokesperson, for all her contributions as well. So thank you to her. Okay, what I'm going to do, we've only got 2 agenda items. If you're ready, Phil, what I think we'll do is take your deputation now, and then I will ask Lisa to present the report. And then I know we have Councillor Todd and Councillor Louise Parker-Jones want to speak after that. So, Phil, if you're ready, would you like to present your deputation now? Okay, so I think he's dropped out. I'm just going to admit him again. Phil, are you there?
Yes.
Okay, we can see you now. I'm going to go on to mute because we're getting some feedback. But if you're ready to do your presentation, that'd be great. Thank you.
Yes. I've got the feedback at the moment. Is it my fault? No, that's good. Can you all hear me now? Yes, thanks very much. Thank you, Chair, for letting me speak at today's decision meeting. I'd like to say a few words about the draft Hampshire Bus Service Improvement Plan. First, I must say that compared with what has happened before, this is a considerable step change in the scope, quality, and extent of strategic discussion about developing bus services across Hampshire. Officers obviously had a formidable task writing the plan in such a short time and must have worked very hard to meet the 31st of October deadline. I very much hope it will bring in funds to improve bus services across the county. Much that is proposed will bring about vast improvements, for example, speeding up buses on 40 corridors, improving punctuality, increasing passenger numbers by 10% and more in Portsmouth and Southampton, simplifying ticketing, reducing fares for 16 to 21-year-olds, improving information, improving bus fleet, improving links. That's all stuff you're familiar with, and I'm not underestimating what it will do. Looking ahead, though, I worry all this work, however extensive, does too little, too late to cut transport carbon emissions in any meaningful way. The latest government data on Hampshire emissions, 2019, pre-COVID, say 50.56% of net emissions come from transport. Hampshire cannot tackle global heating without radically reducing transport emissions. This plan should be central to the Climate Change Action Plan. Journeys made on well-filled buses have 1/4 of the carbon footprint of journeys made by car. After electrification, mode shift will still be needed to reduce the demand for green electricity. As Bus Back Better on page 18 says, buses are vital to ensuring the economy meets net zero carbon emissions and driving the green transformation. In congested areas, substantial modal shift away from the car will soon be needed if clean air targets and the government's broader climate goals are to be met. The only mode capable of sufficient expansion at the time available is the bus. We need more people to choose the bus for their journeys. We need to reverse the declines of the past. The guidance is also clear on this. In paragraph 44, it says BSIPs should describe in outline how LTAs and operators in an area can achieve the overarching goal of the National Bus Strategy, to grow bus patronage, both to build it back after the pandemic and then to increase it and raise buses' mode share. DFT data tells us that in a county like Hampshire, on average, each person makes 983 journeys per year, but only 20 of them by bus. This means that a 10% increase in bus use will result in 2 additional bus journeys per person per year. This will be only 0.2% of all journeys and will raise buses' modal share from 2.3% to 2.5%. I hope the plan can develop into one that will have a more significant impact on reducing transport emissions. To do this, it would need an overarching mode share goal of at least 10 to 20%, or maybe even more. The DfT may view the effective current mode share goal of 2.52% as unambitious and not worthy of their support. Unfortunately, any impression of a lack of ambition may be reinforced when the DfT read paragraph 2.1, which says, bus services and usage in Hampshire are above the national average and are relatively good for a large, predominantly rural shire authority with above average levels of car ownership. It is a problem that the DfT data tells a very different story. On bus trips per person per year, Hampshire ranks 65 out of 89 transport authorities. It is well below average. The national average is 73.4 trips per person per year, almost 4 times the rate of trips in Hampshire. Even in the League of Shire Counties, Hampshire comes below the middle of the ranking. It's 25th out of 45. There could be funds to go beyond what the plan proposes. If the 3 billion set aside nationally by the government is allocated in the proportions used recently for other transport schemes, apparently based on bus use, Hampshire stands to gain nearly £65 million in funding. Nationally, a further 1.5 billion was thrown into the pot for public transport yesterday. An ambitious plan could bring in £100 million. Bus operators in Hampshire have in many ways done a really good job, but I hope that there will be an opportunity for the County Council to take a stronger strategic lead. HCC could draw on its deeper and broader knowledge of Hampshire and its emissions to fund a fundamental rethink of bus service provision across the county. It could incorporate but go beyond the practical experience of the operators. There is an opportunity to make bus services so attractive that they will achieve a mode share big enough to cut transport emissions. I hope the plan will be expanded to do far more on reconfiguring the bus network to reflect all main car traffic flows, creating turn up and go frequencies to connect all main towns and along all main corridors, ensuring connectivity of routes and timetables and full integration with rail services, engaging with communities to co-design improvements by developing community bus partnerships for routes and groups of routes, introducing comprehensive bus gates and traffic restraints. Anything less would be to miss this great opportunity to embed climate change in an area of work crucial to emissions reduction. Thank you, Chair, for giving me time to speak.
Oh, you're muted, Councillor Humby.
I've lost the sound.
Well, somebody had to do it, and it'll be me, won't it? So yeah, Phil, thank you very much, and do appreciate the time and effort you put into that and the presentation. What I'll do is I'm going to get Lisa to present the report now, and she will pick up some of those issues that you've addressed through there. So thank you, Phil. So Lisa, could you present the report as set out, please? Thank you.
Yeah, of course. Thank you, everyone. Okay, so I'm really pleased to be able to present our report on Hampshire's Bus Service Improvement Plan, or BSIP. As you remember, we came to decision day back in June and sought authority to enter into or begin negotiations to enter into an enhanced partnership That was approved back in June, and the first step of that is to establish and publish a bus service improvement plan. This is a live document. It's reviewed every 6 months, and it sets out Hampshire's high level of ambition with regards to bus services. Sorry. It talks about bus priority, it talks about simpler fares, expansion of our bus rapid transit networks, it talks about decarbonisation, it talks about reducing journey times, all with a key aim of achieving passenger growth. So I'm here today to seek authority for the approval of the BSIP, or the Bus Service Improvement Plan, which is attached as Appendix 1, and also to submit the BSIP by the end of October, i.e. tomorrow, to the Department for Transport. I'm also seeking authority for us to engage and consult with key stakeholders to help us steer the direction of the enhanced partnership schemes that will be developed as the next phase of Hampshire's response to the National Bus Strategy.
Okay, that's great. Thank you very much. I'll just make a few points and I'll ask Councillor Todd to comment as well, make his points. What I would say is when this was first announced, I think the speed that we worked at the County Council, I think I met the officer team the following day. It was originally announced and the day after that. And then with our partners and as the bus operators, who we have an excellent partnership and working arrangement with. And it's always interesting to note that prior to COVID, except from outside London, I think we were the only authority that bus patronage has actually been going up over that period of time. Still
Absolutely.
a lot of work to do, as Phil Gagg says, but from that point of view, and the bus operators do acknowledge that we are one of the, let's put it this way, one of the easiest authorities to work with, and that relationship has paid dividends over the years. So thank you for that. Councillor Todd, you'd like to make some comments on this paper?
Yes, thank you, Councillor Humby. First of all, I need to declare a personal but non-prejudicial interest. I'm the Cabinet Member at Winchester City Council with responsibility for parking, and as such spend over £1 million a year on buses, particularly the park and ride service that we offer. And also in my role as City Councillor, a Cabinet Member, work closely with Hampshire on the City of Winchester movement strategy, which is looking at how we can be particularly ambitious about buses in the Winchester area.
Yeah.
But stepping back and speaking as an opposition spokesperson for the whole county rather than as a Winchester person, first thing to say is I would like to congratulate the officers for the tremendous amount of work that they've done in a very short period of time. And there is much to be excited and positive about in this paper. I think I have questions in a few areas. Like Mr. Gagg, I am concerned about the linkage to our carbon ambitions. If we look at what it takes to decarbonize travel, you know, to be well on the way towards net zero by 2030, then I would question whether the 5% and 10% goals are appropriate or ambitious enough. I think the objective that's been set for recovery from pre-COVID is a sensible one, and it's important that we sort of do that first. And that in places will be challenging because it relies on work patterns that may have permanently changed. I'm concerned in terms of what we need to be trying to do, and maybe it's a question of clarity, but if we're just growing 5% on top of current levels, as opposed to 5 percentage points of journey or 5% a year, I think 5% in the following, 2 years, and then 10%, further 10% by 2030, doesn't feel like it's consistent with what we need to do to achieve our carbon goals. And I think if we put that greater ambition into the plan, and I recognise that we don't have a huge amount of time to do it, but we may be looking at a 6-monthly revision to do that,
yeah. And
we may be looking at the full partnership to do that. Then I think we at least need to ask ourselves, what are more ambitious? What start from the carbon goal and work back and say, well, what does this actually mean? In terms of shaping my response or our response on this, I have done some informal survey work within the Winchester district to ask what people want to see improved. The number one that I get is greater frequency.
Mm-hmm.
We have a few routes with very good frequency, but they are a few. Then I get cheaper buses as the next one, and then better evening services. And I'm happy to share the results with officers. As I said, it's fairly informal, but these things are always helpful. And I want to quickly explore the cheaper buses point, because I think this is an area where a bit more work is needed and a bit more thought is needed. Particularly, I would say, for Winchester and Andover, we define the local bus market area quite tightly. And so the Winchester one, which I know best, we talk about a £4.40 ticket as a day ticket, but that defines Winchester as basically the town wards, as we refer to them in Winchester City Council, plus Kingsworthy, plus Oliver's Battery, plus Littleton. I get a lot about value from places that are near Winchester, look to Winchester, want to use the buses to get to Winchester, like Twyford, Colden Common, Compton, Shawford. Admittedly, they have a train service, but certainly Twyford and Colden Common, I think an area that Councillor Humby knows well, want to be using the buses more, but the cost is very high. And I think there's a question that we need to say, well, actually, if we take a wider definition of that travel area, then it becomes much less affordable for many people. I think also there's a second thing which slightly follows from how we're handling school transport, which is I think there are big opportunities through better integrating with what we're trying to do to get people to school, because again, it is the regular buses, and let's pick Colden Common and Twyford because it's an area both Councillor Humby and I know well, that are doing the heavy lifting to get young people and to school and college. And again, I think we need to be thinking more about the services that enable that, and not putting school buses in one camp and every other type of bus in another camp. The third thing, I don't know if it's the third thing, maybe it's the fourth thing. When I talk to councillors about what they're interested in, I get a lot of discussion about routes and the scope of routes, and certainly in the decarbonisation discussions we're having, there's a recognition that we need to be converting people out of cars with longer, more direct routes and affordably. Because again, you know, if somebody's in Colden Common, it's much cheaper to bring their family into Winchester by car, either to the park and ride, or even, frankly, it's pretty close to get them into a park and walk car park. Park and ride, the city centre ones, it's not cheaper, but it's so that's I think something that we need to think about in terms of the routes. Decarbonisation has implications for our route structure, and I'm not sure we fully addressed that yet. And then the last point, I think, in terms of engagement, and there are a few factual questions I have in the paper that relate to the area I know best. 4 authorities, 4 districts are spending money on buses already. So Basingstoke, Winchester, Eastleigh and Rushmore, either through funding Park and Ride or through subsidising buses. The 2 big ones in spending terms are probably Winchester and Basingstoke. And I think it would be useful to consider them as partners, and also recognise the opportunity they have, because many districts are collecting community infrastructure levy, which is designed to deal with the infrastructure impacts of extra development. And when it comes to bus priority measures and other such activities, I think have the potential to be useful partners in helping to move things ahead. So overall, I welcome the paper. obviously I support us submitting a bus service improvement plan. I think the next revision needs to think more about particularly value, route design, and within an overarching ambition more closely linked to carbon. So I think this is very powerful, and I think there are opportunities to work more closely with districts and tie them into the process of driving improvements in our bus infrastructure. But I certainly wouldn't want us not. And then there are some technical points that I will handle separately via email.
I think
but I wouldn't. Yeah, I would support moving ahead, basically.
Okay. All right, that's great, Martin, and thank you for that. I will ask Lisa just to see if she can cover a few of those points. And like you said, there's some details that you can go back through. I mean, the 4 main points there were the carbon ambitions, the cheaper buses, the routes, and then the working in partnership with the districts. If you want to cover some of that, Lisa, but as Martin has said, some of that can be picked up at a later stage with him if we need to. So over to you, Lisa.
Absolutely. Okay, so the first one to easily cover off is working more closely together. Absolutely, completely agree, and I'll get that sorted, ready for the next step of the enhanced partnership. Secondly, cheaper fares. That's a discussion I'll have with you separately. There's been a lot of work going on in the background about cheaper fares, and I think it's one of those industry complex conversations, but I'll take that offline with you. But I completely accept the challenge there. Let's focus quickly on decarbonisation, because that's the biggest comment from both Phil and yourself, Councillor Todd. So I think, going back to Phil's point, I think Phil raised an important point when he looked at our kind of performance, as it were, in terms of Hampshire, in terms of bus use. As Councillor Humby said, we have seen passenger growth, but if you were to look at that, it's one of those statistics. It depends how you look at it. If you look at it per head of population, then perhaps we don't stack up as well as some of our neighbouring authorities. And I think I will go away and tweak some of those words, if that's okay with you, Councillor Humby, just to reflect that. I think that what the bus service improvement plan does, and what we have to recognise that it does, is that it acts as a stepping stone towards decarbonisation. It is not the answer to decarbonisation, because it's a short-term funding package. It's over 3 years. It's not going to take us far enough to reach that decarbonisation goal. We're not sure what level of settlement we're going to get. I read the budget slightly differently, I think, to Phil yesterday, and I read the budget that there was perhaps 1.2 billion rather than the full 3 billion to share between the bus service improvement plan. So we'll see when the detail comes out about that, about how that stacks up with the share across the country. I think that returning to pre-COVID figures is a huge ask and shouldn't be underestimated in terms of our first steps towards achieving decarbonisation. COVID has had a massive hit on public transport services. You only have to look at a bus, or if you are close enough and the train's going slow enough, to look at a train also to see that the usage is not there at pre-COVID levels. I think we have to focus on getting those people back on public transport services, and then the next immediate focus is encouraging more people onto public transport services to give us that concrete base we need to then build upon our decarbonisation aims and ambitions. I think that if you were to look at our bid, the funding package isn't included in the report because it doesn't need to be, and because we're still working on it, frankly, because there's a lot of detail that needs to go into it. But as I left the spreadsheet to come here today, the ask is over 100 million from Hampshire, which I think really demonstrates our ambition and our determination to build a better network of bus services in Hampshire. You know, whether we get all that or whether we don't, what the settlement is, that's another point. But in terms of our ambition and what we're trying to achieve, it's over 100 million. And that's before you add on the sum, which I've also included in our ask, for electric vehicles, which is a further £1 million. Now, that's a huge sum of money, and that's unachievable. But what we're trying to show the DfT and what we're trying to show government is this is what we want for Hampshire, and this is what we think it would take for Hampshire. And that's our stepping stone to build upon for how we go forward with this live document, the live BSIP. When we get the funding package, we can revise our targets, we can revise it based on the concrete knowledge of how much funding we have and where that funding needs to be prioritised. Okay. So I think with regards to decarbonisation, I wouldn't want anyone to think that we weren't committed to doing that. We just need to get back to pre-COVID first.
Lisa, thank you for that and appreciate that. And also, I'm sure you can pick up some of that with Martin on those finer points afterwards. I would now like to, welcome Louise Parker-Jones. Welcome. And would you like to make your points and comments on the paper, Louise? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Humby. And actually, I will cut out quite a lot of what I was going to say because they've been covered so lovely by everybody else.
That's what I was worried about, but okay.
Yeah. So I was going to talk a lot about decarbonisation and actually how critical it is. So I was absolutely thrilled with reading quite a lot of the strategy because I felt that if those 10 ambitions are met, they will go a very long way to encouraging people to use buses. My declaring an interest is I'm a bus user, I'm a pedestrian, I'm a cyclist, and I'm a non-driver. So perhaps I should declare that up front. So anything that improves our bus system and services has got to be welcomed. And I do think it's ambitious. I would love for us to go fall out the gates and get everybody out of their cars, but I am also realistic. So I do think there are some things that we do need to concentrate on more. One is about working with people on car parks and making it so it's more attractive to get on the bus and not drive your car into places. Real-time information, when you've waited at a bus stop and nothing has arrived for 40 minutes and you don't know why, it's infuriating, it's frustrating, and I do understand why. So anything on real-time information has got to be a good thing. So there's so much that I actually welcomed. Improvements for young people. A lot of young people do not want to use the buses, and anything that we can do to encourage them and make them feel safer as well, because some people don't feel safe using buses. So there was lots that I felt this is really going in the right direction. But always there's these little things that make me go, oh, could we have been more ambitious? What are the routes? And are those routes that we're looking at now, are they going to stand the test of time in 5 years if new things are coming on? You know, should we be pre-planning where we think demand might be driven to? And have we done some of that sort of future proofing? I'm also worried a little bit about unintended consequences. So this is a very practical example to my area, but we're looking at a new section in Bishopstoke, and one of it to improve the times is about signalising at Riverside, which is notorious for anybody getting out of. But by making it a turn right only and putting in the priorities for the buses to turn means that what happens to those lorries now that currently use that junction? Where do they go? Do they go down our little side streets? So there are things that, you know, whenever we're doing anything like this, have we thought through the unintended consequences of why we're doing what we're doing? And the other aspect is often just getting to the buses. So if you live in North Bishopstoke, you might have like a half-mile walk. And once you get to the buses, maybe you need to cycle to get there, you know, and having all that interconnectivity. So if you've cycled, can you lock your bike up, and can you find a locker to put your lid in when you've got to the town centre? Because once you're trying to go around the shops and you're loaded up with your backpack and your cycle lid on your back and you're carrying your coat and all your equipment, you know, you want to know that it could be put somewhere safe. So I'd like to think that we're looking at this holistically, you know, that we're going to make it so that people can get to those buses, that when they got on the bus, they'll get to the train station on time, or they'll get to the ferry on time. But I was really thrilled when I read that strategy. And so congratulations to all the officers for pulling this together. I will, of course, be demanding more because we've got to do more to reduce our carbon. We've got to. We can't wait. You know, there is no planet B, and we are in a climate crisis, and it is an emergency. But I very much welcome it. But I do hope some of those other aspects that just help to improve journeys for people could be considered. I hope I've explained myself well, and I'm happy.
Louise, you have.
I'll ignore the rest of the other points because they've been covered perfectly by Councillor Todd and Mr. Gagg before me.
Okay, that's great, Louise. Thank you very much. And certainly for your input and your enthusiasm into the subject as well. I will get Lisa just to address a few of those points. What I would say is on some of those issues around making the bus sort of more user-friendly and all that, like to think Hampshire has led the way on that in a lot of areas, certainly on real-time passenger information, contactless payments, and the way they are now. I mean, several of us on this call just have been on some of the new buses recently, and they're like a first-class carriage sort of things and that type of thing. So the actual user, I suppose, experience of it is considerably better than it used to be some time ago. I also think that the LTP4, Local Transport Plan 4, where it focuses on the walking, cycling, public transport, it does address a lot of those issues. The emphasis on being sort of literally getting to the bus stop and that experience of all going through that as well. So I think some of that is addressed. Lisa, do you want to pick up just on a few of those points, and then I'd like to move on? Thank you.
Absolutely. I really welcome your comments, and I would agree with you about how important it is to make sure people's journey to the bus stop is equally as easy as their journey on the bus, because that's where your journey begins, from your home till you get back home again. We need to ensure that everything we can do is done to make that journey as smooth as possible. And I actually think that that's one of our priorities in our funding package we've put to government, because that's something we can do something about more immediately than changing a roundabout. It's actually quite a long-term process. Whereas if you've got a funding package between now and 2025, improving real-time information, that's something we can do with the appropriate funding levels relatively quickly, and it can make a real difference. So I absolutely agree with your comments, and those are taken on board in terms of our prioritisation, in terms of any funding that's coming on board with us.
All right, that's great. Thank you very much. I don't know, Councillor Warwick, did you want to make a few comments on the carbon side of that, in terms of your interest in your area?
Yeah, there's been some really good contributions this afternoon, so thank you for those. I think as you said, Councillor Humby, this is part of it's a stepping stone, and it's part of the process that then joins up with LTP4, which again has a massive carbon contribution. And if you think of somewhere like London, you wouldn't dream of driving through London. You would get the tube because it's quicker, it's cheaper, and it's easier. So it's all of those things. So I guess our task is to make the bus the tube for Hampshire, if you like, and make it attractive. How we attract young people, I guess we put Martin Todd at the wheel of the electric bus, but certainly that whole electric Wi-Fi, that interior of that bus was super, wasn't it? And it was just a pleasure to drive in that. So I hope that's the way forward, that we will see some of those electric models coming on stream soon. That feels really positive. And Lisa, I know Martin talked a little bit about survey work, and it does upset me to see so many empty buses driving around at the moment. Is there a group that are perhaps no longer travelling on the bus that we need to attract, that are perhaps not, since COVID are nervous? Perhaps it's the elderly passengers. I don't know if you have that data or if you're planning to survey that work. Thank you, Councillor Humby.
Thank you, Lisa. I'd just like to address that point, but the report does actually look at oversupply as well as undersupply, and I think that's an interesting comment you make. Lisa, just very quickly, then I'll move on to Councillor Philpott very quickly. Thank you.
Yes, in answer to your question, Councillor Warwick, we have got the data on the return to bus, as it were, and we know what in proportion, whether we're seeing a higher proportion of, say, young people, which we are, with college transport and school transport, and a reduction in the number of older people using public transport. And that is definitely the group that we're not seeing back in relative terms as much as the other age groups. And that's something, there's definitely something we can do about that, should the funding be available. Thank you, Lisa. Councillor Philpott, if you'd like to make a comment, you've got your hand up.
Yes, I have. Thank you, Chairman. I'll be very brief, and I won't want to go over the other points that other people have mentioned already in the positive comments. I understand that some people may feel that it could go a little further, could be a little more ambitious. I think actually it's a very ambitious and aspirational document, and especially as we don't know how much money we're going to get from the Bus Back Better at this stage. So I think it would be premature for us to assume how much money we're going to get. So on those circumstances, I think it's a very, very good document. The other comment I would make is that my committee had the opportunity to hear a high-level overview presentation. I'm very grateful for the officers for giving that. I think that was extremely instructional and very, very useful. I have just one question, and that relates, it's really for Lisa. It relates to page 60, just for clarification, if you could for me, Lisa, page 60, which is the section 6 overview table. So I'm looking at table 9. And I just wanted to clarify whether we wanted to, just to help me out on this. On the first line, under it says the metric is journey time. The BSIP target for the end of March 2025 is a 4% reduction in journey times, but the average recorded for figure for 2018, 19 and 1920 says the figure is still being calculated. So I just wanted to know that you want to save a 4% on the journey time, but it doesn't say what 4% of, because it doesn't have a figure that's been calculated. Has that been done since this report was put together, or have I missed something? So.
Yeah, Lisa, no, address that. Yeah.
Yep. No, you've not missed something. The reason that figure is still to be calculated is because we're waiting on data from the bus operators. We've got the indicative data, but we didn't want to include indicative data in the report. We wanted to make sure it was accurate and absolutely spot on. So we've got the indicative figures from the bus operators to enable us to draw targets from, but we're waiting on the very specifics, and that's why that figure's not in there. But when we come to revise, bear in mind it's a live document. When we come to revise it, we can make sure that's updated and included.
Okay, that's great, Lisa. Yeah, and thank you, Steve. Russell, did you want to make a quick comment, or are you happy we move?
Thank you, Chairman. Just briefly to say, I fully endorse the bus service improvement plan. I think it's an excellent document. I just, in commenting, want to say one very complimentary thing about the government and one less complimentary thing. The complimentary thing is that I think the government deserves huge credit for the focus it's putting into buses. It's clearly a high priority for the Prime Minister, and the Chancellor's put £3 billion of funding into it. And I think that's extremely welcome, and I give huge credit to the government for that. It's very important for our country and for our decarbonisation plans generally. Where I'm less complimentary is around the fact that we have been pressing government for some years now to give us powers to make small charges for the free bus passes on an annual basis, as well as a small charge for each journey. And that's always been resisted by the government. Now, our consultations show that people are willing to pay these small charges. And the reason for that is that people realise that we need viable routes in a big county like Hampshire. People realise that a free bus pass is not much good if there are no buses for them to catch. So we'll continue to make that case to government, and I hope they'll start to listen to us on that, because I think that will be a big help. Obviously, we want to get our fair share of this £3 billion, and if we can get anywhere near 100 million, that'd be fantastic. But I think giving us these extra powers would also make a big difference in allowing us to build bus routes across Hampshire, serving all of our communities. Thanks, Jeff.
No, thank you, Russ. You make a good point. I was worried you were going to move into the areas of devolution for a minute or two, and I thought, well, we'll stop it there. But actually, you know, there is a point there about giving us the flexibility of how we raise our income and how we spend it. Stuart, did you want to make a final quick brief comment on some of those points, or are you okay?
Yeah, no, thanks, Roy. I just really wanted to make two very quick points, which I think really goes to the heart of the debate. But the bus improvement strategy is not the only tool in the locker for decarbonising the transport system. And I think a number of members have made the point as well. LTP4 will set the policy framework for that. Yep. But it isn't only about getting everybody out of their car. It's probably going to decarbonise the transport system more by changing the means of propulsion of vehicles away from fossil fuels. And therefore, you know, whilst I agree it's very important, public transport plays an important role in that, it's not the only answer. And public, you know, and decarbonisation isn't the only priority for public transport. I thought Councillor Parker-Jones put it really well by saying, you know, this is about encouraging more people to use buses. And I think that's absolutely right. We've got to be reasonable. My other point was to be realistic about the funding, you know, because yes, the government have been very ambitious in the announcements, but they've also been very ambitious in top slicing quite a lot of that to the mayoral combined authorities over the weekend. Yep. And Hampshire isn't a mayoral combined authority, and it's not in the North or the Midlands. So I think we've got to be prudent and plan for a realistic assumption. Ambitious, yes, but not completely unrealistic about the level of funding that we're likely to receive from this national pot.
Stuart, thank you for that, and two really valid points there. And we, we were waiting to see with interest, weren't we? I just wanted to say a huge thank you to Mr. Gagg and to Martin and Louise as well for all the positive comments. As Lisa said, it is a live document. It is ongoing. I think it's a really good start. And a huge thank you to Lisa and the team and all the officers to put this together really in such a short space of time. It's a really good document, and well done, Lisa, to you and the team, and through Stuart as well. So as you've heard, lots of positive comments, work to do, live document, and I'm really, really pleased that we've got this far so quickly. I think there was a little measure and check there from Stuart on your sort of potentially your 100 million, Lisa. I think we hope that you do, and we all do as well. But try and be realistic as well. But I mean, I love your enthusiasm as well. So well done. So I don't think there's any further comments. So I'm really, really pleased with the document. As I say, genuinely thank you to everybody that's had input into this today, and to Mr. Gagg as well. So Katie, I'd like to accept the recommendations as set out in paras 2 to 4 on page 3. Thank you very much. Okay, so we now go on to agenda item 2, which is the bus priority enforcement policy. And I think we have Frank Baxter going to present the paper. Frank, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Humby. In terms of thinking holistically, this paper is seeking authority to adopt a policy and a code of practice to engage in bus priority enforcement. As such, it is directly complementary to the BSIP plan that you have seen just discussed, and joins up some of the thinking and certainly the bidding and the schemes that we put forward for in the BSIP. In summary, Appendix 1 includes the policy. This sets out effectively the rules by which we would like to undertake enforcement, the high-level rules, if you like, with the aim of speeding up buses and making them increasingly more reliable. The practice document is a very practical guide to effectively how we will implement bus lane enforcement. It considers things like how we will deal with complaints, what technologies we use, the processes for managing penalty charge notice enforcement activity. Effectively, both of these documents put a platform in place to allow us to undertake future enforcement. At this stage, though, they are not asking for authority to implement any schemes on the ground, simply to put in place the framework in which we can do so. And on that basis, I commend the report to you, Councillor Humby.
Frank, thank you very much for that. And as you say, it goes in hand in hand with the previous paper as well. Councillor Todd, you wanted to comment on this paper?
Yeah, no, I think this is a very welcome improvement. I know there were times when we've been frustrated in terms of potential yellow boxes or other things that might be used to control movement in Winchester better, that we didn't have this kind of, or in my division better. And I know there are other cases across the county, and I'm a great believer in transferring powers to local government, as long as they're used appropriately and with appropriate safeguards, but that seems to be the case here, and so I welcome and support the paper.
Martin, thank you very much and appreciate those comments. Louise, you also wanted to comment on this paper.
Actually, I was, everything's been said. I think this paper is really important to support and act underneath the strategy that we've just heard. I know it's not asking for very specific areas to be enforced yet. I would love to see it brought in, because it will make traffic flow so much better. It's not just buses that get held up when people use the system inappropriately. So I welcome the report that was presented. Thank you.
Thanks, Louise. That's very, very helpful, and appreciate the positive comments as well. I don't know if either my colleagues, Jan, Russell, Councillor Philpott, I can't see any hands. Would anybody like to make a comment at this stage? No? Okay. Stuart, do you have a final comment on this paper?
Just to say, Councillor Humby, that it's timely to do this, because we're about to embark on a significant expansion of bus priority measures, partly, as you just heard, about the bus service improvement plan, and partly because of the Transforming Cities Fund projects that are going to be rolled out in Southern Hampshire. and partly because with lots of big developments underway in and around the county and about to come forward, again, bus priority will be an important part of the mitigation of some of that. So it's very timely to get in place a comprehensive policy and clarity about our approach to enforcement, because of course bus priority is ineffective if it's unenforced.
Absolutely, and as you said, absolutely timely. So once again, so thank you to the officers for putting this together, and Frank and his team as well. I'm extremely pleased to see the paper. I don't think probably have any comments from anybody else. It's nice to have two papers that have been very much supported sort of across party and everybody in principle as well, and it makes a pleasant change actually, if I might say, from that point of view. But thank you, as I say, to Mr. Gagg and to everybody, and to Martin and to Louise as well, and thank you for that input, Louise, and your first sort of meeting on this as well, so much appreciated. So Katie, I'm very happy to accept the recommendations as set out in para 2 to 3 on page 81. That just leaves me to thank everybody, all the contributions, to all the officers present as well, who I know always sit in the background there as well. I'm sure there'd be some thinking of Diana here, there'd be some comms that we'll be doing on this fairly shortly. I know Councillor Philpott sent me a useful paper earlier to see what some others were doing, so I'm sure Councillor Warwick will be looking at that and what we'll be doing on that. And also a huge thank you to Katie that also organises effectively everything and runs it all really, and then it's not us at all. So thank you, Katie, we'll look like that. So can I ask you formally to ask the webcast to be stopped, and I will bring this session and meeting to a close. Thank you all very much. Thank you.